My name is Cait, and I'm currently completing an MSc, Masters in Applied Paediatric Neuropsychology at UCL. I'm conducting my research dissertation on children with Agenesis of Corpus Callosum, and I'm currently supervised by Dr. Hannah Booth, who has a big affiliation with physical therapy. Lauren has encouraged me to come here today and do this talk because she thought that it would be a great opportunity to start meeting people from the community and also get the opportunity to talk a bit about my research. So, with that, today I'm briefly going to go over what ACC is, so I'm sure most of you are familiar, and go through some current gaps that we've got in the evidence base at the moment. And then my plan is to tell you a bit about my research study. It is going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but if you do have any questions that come up, there will be a chance at the end to ask any questions, and I'll try my best to answer them. So, the corpus callosum is a large C-shaped white matter tract that divides the brain into the left and the right sides of the brain. And when we talk about white matter, I feel like a good way of describing it is essentially like the brain's communication network. So you've got lots of different parts of the brain that are specialised for lots of different functions, but these different areas rarely work in isolation. So what we need is something that will help them to rapidly communicate with one another. And this is essentially what white matter is for. So you've got white matter that's going from like the top to the bottom of the brain. You've got some tracts that are going from back to front, and then you've also got ones that cross the midline, so the two sides of the brain. And the corpus callosum fits into that latter category there. So it is the largest white matter tract in the brain, and it's made up of 200 million nerve fibres. So it's quite critical. And yeah, as I sort of alluded to, in terms of function, the corpus callosum is essentially the main pathway for sharing sensory, motor and cognitive information between the two hemispheres. It kind of acts as like this neural highway or like a bridge, like Marie was talking about earlier, that allows this constant transfer of information. So in terms of its development, it's typically expected that it's developed by the 10th and the 15th prenatal week, and structurally, most of its connections are present by birth. But there is also this continued development and refining of those connections all the way through childhood and adolescence. So that process doesn't stop at birth. And in atypical development, something interrupts that process of neural development before birth. So this could be all manner of things, ranging from genetic reasons to sort of infections happening in pregnancy. But a lot of the time we just don't know what the cause is. And depending on what the cause of disruption is and when it occurs, this can result in lots of different conditions of the corpus callosum. And the focus of today is going to be on essentially the failure for the corpus callosum to grow and absence of it. And you can either have complete absence of the corpus callosum, where it is completely absent, or you can have partial agenesis, where it started to develop but something's gotten in the way of it developing fully. And you might be thinking, if children do have this complete or partial absence of the corpus callosum, how do they function without it? And essentially what happens is that the brain finds different ways to adapt through mechanisms of what we call neuroplasticity. So it finds alternative routes in the brain to find ways to transfer that information around. And because of the wide variation within how the corpus callosum might not development, and then how the brain compensates and finds different routes after this, there's also this large variation in what ACC might actually look like for different people. So these are some of the challenges, I don't know if you can see them, that might be part of a particular profile for someone with ACC, some of the differences. Some people might experience many of these challenges, some might experience only a few of them, and there might also be things that aren't on here that people recognise as part of their own profile. So it's quite variable. Or heterogeneous, as Marie was also saying earlier. It's another great way of describing it. So, as we've established, there is quite a lot of variability. in how ACC might present to different people. And a few years ago now, Warren Brown and Lynn Paul, Lynn who will be talking to you after me, they sought to reconcile this really variable evidence base and created a model based on what they'd observed in their own research with adults with ACC. And what the model suggested is that in primary ACC, that there were some core features that they found which were essentially responsible for a lot more of the more secondary challenges that people face. So the challenges that they highlighted were that there were this more limited communication between the hemispheres, sort of a slowed information processing, slow processing speed, and then also these difficulties managing more novel or complex information. And basically what they sort of suggest is that these core challenges then feed into the more secondary difficulties that people face. So the example that they've got here is social skills. But part of the problem that we have in research at the moment is that we don't really have much evidence to say that this is true for children. So there's lots of evidence sort of supporting this in adults, but not so much showing that it does apply to children with ACC. So if we start to break down how this model might apply to children, and specifically focusing on the more difficulty processing complex and novel information, executive functioning challenges is something that's quite nicely applied here. And executive functions are essentially, I feel like a good way of describing it is the brain's management system. So these are skills that help us to organise ourselves, problem solve, and adapt when things don't go to plan. So a lot of you will have needed to use your executive skills to get here today. So organising your families to get out the door, organising transport, adapting if you miss a train. So you need all those skills like day to day. They're quite critical. Yeah, so this is something that quite nicely applies to this part of the model. And children with ACC are reported by parents and teachers to have quite a lot of difficulties with this. And it shows up on some cognitive tests as well. And another thing that I would like us to consider is processing speed. And processing speed is essentially how quickly the brain is able to take in information, understand it, and then respond to it. So this maps on obviously quite nicely to the slow cognitive processing in the model. But actually in children, studies show that on average they have processing speeds in the typical range. But the particular study that I'm referring to here, the results of it actually showed that there was quite a lot of variability again, so kind of theme of like lots of variation in how children present. So some children had much slower processing speed than others, and some had actually faster than average processing speed. So this seems to be something that's quite individual for the child. And then if we think about what we might call the more secondary challenges according to Horn and Brown's model, there is quite a body of research, and it's come up a bit today as well, talking about social differences. There's quite a lot of research to show that people with ACC have challenges with this. So this can range from having difficulties understanding people's thoughts and perspectives, recognising emotions, and actually as well what Marie was referring to, I think it was Marie, was saying that unfortunately some people are more vulnerable to being easily persuaded or tricked. So this seems to be something that comes up quite a lot. And then again, if we try and sort of apply this to the model, I think something that's really helpful to consider about social interactions is that they're actually incredibly complex. So every conversation that we have requires us to listen to what's being said. We've then got to interpret facial expressions, we've got to understand tone of voice, and then bring all of that information together and work out what somebody is thinking or meaning. And then we've got to plan our own response. And we have to do this in a matter of seconds, so it's quite a quick process ordinarily. So then if we do apply it to the key challenges proposed by Corpal, you can kind of see that challenges in this limited transfer of information across the brain, if we're trying to combine the spoken words, then the facial expressions, the tone of voice, all of that together, and we're struggling to coordinate those different areas of the brain, that could be quite challenging. And then thinking about the difficulties managing the more novel or complex information, we've then got to sort of bring all of that information together and work out what somebody's thinking or meaning. So that can be quite problematic as well. And then with the slow processing speed, what might happen in this kind of social situation is that by the time we coordinate everything here and formulate what someone's thinking or meaning, then formulate the response, the conversation might have actually moved on before we've had time to process what's happening. So yeah, it applies quite nicely when we think about the model. And coming from all this evidence and sort of missing evidence as well, my research question essentially seeks to explore whether differences in processing speed and processing more complex novel information helps to explain differences in social skills and social use of language in children with ACC. So we really want to establish more of an evidence base for children in this context. And then in terms of the specifics, we will be looking for children who are aged 8 to 16 years with unacally diagnosed isolated ACC. And then the assessments will comprise of 2 remote assessments of the researcher where we'll work through a variety of different thinking and problem-solving tasks, some more social scenario-based activities and language activities. And then we're also going to ask parents if they'll be able to complete some forms regarding their child's everyday experience, because actually, whilst this is great information to have, sometimes having a child in the testing environment is not representative of how they are from day to day. So by getting all of this together, we hope to get more of a holistic idea of what that child is really like. And we hope that by understanding more about the key challenges associated with ACC, that we'll be able to provide better guidance to families following diagnosis, identify children who might need that little bit more of support, and also be able to inform the development of future interventions. So, for example, if we found that social difficulties were linked to that slower processing speed or more executive challenges, support could focus on helping support these underlying thinking skills rather than just the social behaviour alone. So yeah, if this study sounds like something that your family might be interested in, taking part in, please feel free to come and talk to myself and Rhonda, or drop either of us an email, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have about involvement. Yeah, so that's, to wrap up, I want to say a big thank you to all the families in the ACC community that continue to contribute to research, because we essentially couldn't advance all of our understanding without your continued support and participation. I also want to say a big thank you to Rhonda for being an amazing supervisor. She's taken me through this MFC, and yeah, she's also helped me to get this opportunity to work today. And I also want to say a big thank you to Corpal as well for providing me with this opportunity to talk today. So I've also just attached some links here. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Corpal website, given that you've got me here today. But also, this information booklet has lots of really accessible information about conditions of the Corpus Callosum. So some of the earlier topics that I whizzed through at the start of this presentation, yeah, it's really broken down in a really nice way there. Right, that's it. Any questions?
In terms of the research you're doing, what difference does when the diagnosis happens make? Why is that important?
Sorry, could you say that again, please?
You said about the timing of the diagnosis being pre-internal.
So do you mean as in like...
When the ACC needs to...
Oh, sorry, yeah, so that's more to do with being able to confirm that it sort of happened before birth. So, no, sorry, someone's going to correct me. Yes.
Yeah, we actually...
I actually do know the answer to this, because we couldn't fix the explanation based on that. I was just... It's not working. My executive skills have just gone out the window. This is my first time everybody, so, you know.
To answer your question, it's actually about recruitment bias. We were initially only going to include people where diagnosis was made before birth, whereas if it was after birth, then could be possibly more likely reasons why the diagnosis was made, that there was additional problems. So it was almost to get more of a pure sample, if that makes sense. But we're actually now thinking the practicalities of it. It could be diagnosed pre or postnatally. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just interested because Alison was diagnosed by accident at like 7, I believe. 6.
So
Yeah.
is that an more incidental?
He had sepsis, they scanned him and went, you know about ACC, and it gave us what ACC was.
Yeah.
And he stood there going, we don't know what we're talking about. And they went, so they were shot things and mentioned in school, he was doing. Because the children at Lacey are more disabled than what our son was presenting in that instance. So that's why we were asking the questions, because we found out at 6 years old that he had it.
Yeah, so incidental findings would be great. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cait. Really interesting there, and it's surely something we're going to support as Corpal.